minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock. A very good Tuesday night to you. Tuesday, May the 5th, 1987. Lassiter with you until 11, as I am every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, right here at News Talk 57 WPLP. We'll break the program into two segments this evening, a guest in the first segment, then we'll just go at it, you and I, for an hour or so a little bit later on. But joining me from the National Legal Foundation is the Executive Director and General Counsel, Robert K. Skolrood, who is one of the people very instrumental in the Alabama book banning case. Mr. Skolrood, are you there, sir?
Good evening, Bob.
Am I saying the name correctly?
That's fine.
All right. The reason I asked you to be on the program is a very short article that appeared in the Tampa Tribune a couple of weeks ago concerning a visit that you had made. You stopped off in Lakeland, held a press conference, said a number of things that I found somewhat curious that I wanted to talk to you about. Not the least of which is that this terrible scourge, secular humanism, is out to destroy Christianity. I wonder if you might somehow elaborate on that. Isn't it kind of the other way around?
No, not at all. In the case in Alabama, we didn't ask that the books be censored. We claimed the books were being censored, and that was our concern in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And that secular humanism is a religion. And if it is a religion, then it should be treated the same as all other religions. It shouldn't be given a preferred place to indoctrinate. Either you put them all in or you take them all out. And then...
Well, it's my understanding that one of your main gripes is that the school books in Alabama just didn't mention God at all.
Well, what we had indicated, basically there were three types of books: history, social studies, and home economics books. What we claimed were that the books systematically eliminated any references to the contributions of specifically Judaism, Christianity, to the culture of America. Now, I'm not talking about tenets of the faith or dogma. We're talking about the Reformation and its impact.
The Reformation? That was a little bit before America, wasn't it?
But even in the history books we're talking about then at America, we're talking about the contributions of the Puritans, the Pilgrims, the Christians and the Jews in establishing the hospitals, Martin Luther King Jr., seldom referred to as a reverend, and that was sort of a cultural thing, but really the Montgomery boycott was the backbone of it, were the black Baptist churches that really made it effective. And these sorts of things are denigrating of the Christian religion itself, were the things that we complained of. Now,
I don't think the civil rights movement was a religious movement, was it?
Well, the boycott was. At least Martin Luther King, it was the black Baptist churches in Montgomery that really were the backbone, and Martin Luther King, of course, was a black pastor, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
The failure in many of the books even to call him a reverend or mention that he was a reverend, or the contribution of the black Baptist churches, or, as you know, the Selma March was mainly called by the religious leaders of America. They came from all over America down there. Pastors and ministers from all over the country were the ones that were instrumental in putting that together.
Because I had always been under the impression that probably Bull Connor had far more to do with the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act than any other man in this country.
Well, but I was talking about the Montgomery boycott as one example of, eliminating that sort of thing from the books. Now, the People for the American Way opposed us, as well as the ACLU. Now, the People for the American Way made a study. The chairman of the committee was from the University of Texas, and another group that made a study is called Americans United for Separation of Church and State, which both groups normally oppose us, but both of their studies came up with the same conclusions. They really didn't oppose us on the history and social studies books. Their witnesses said they were horrible.
Well, we're getting kind of far afield from my initial question. I wonder if you might elaborate on this statement that you made in Lakeland about how the whole, quote-unquote, the whole thrust, i.e. secular humanism, is to destroy Christianity. I wonder if you might elaborate on that a little bit. And I find that an incredibly peculiar statement.
I don't recall that I said it was... I'm sure I never said destroy Christianity.
Oh, it's what you're quoted as in this paper.
What I had indicated was, just what I had said before, that the contributions of Christianity, Judaism, have been eliminated, and that secular humanism is a religion. And if it is a religion, then it's subject to the same rules of strict neutrality that all the other religions are subject to. I never say anything about destroying Christianity, except that the humanist viewpoint is really a negative viewpoint.
Well, what is the humanist viewpoint?
Well, the humanist viewpoint is really a negative one against any kind of theistic religion. They say that God as a human or as a supreme being is either non-existent or is irrelevant, and that man is the supreme value in the universe, and that he is really God, and that there are no absolute morals or values, that everything is relative, and that through the use of the scientific reasoning, the man can save himself, and that there's not a spiritual dimension to man. He's really a material or biological creature. Those are some of the basic beliefs of the humanists, and most of their literature is, of course, negative, specifically as to Christianity.
Most of their literature, as a matter of fact, I happen to have the Humanist Manifesto in front of me. Only 2 of their 17 tenets deal with religion.
Well,
world community, democratic society, these are many of the things that they deal with. Only 2 of the 17 deal with religion.
If you look at it, you see what you have to look is the history of it. See, Humanist Manifesto number 1 was all full of religion and religious terms.
Well, of course, but Humanist Manifesto 2 supersedes Humanist Manifesto 1.
But you have to look at the history of why that took place, because you see, Humanist Manifesto number 1 was in 1933, of which, of course, John Dewey was one of the prime movers. That humanism is the new religion. Then Humanist Manifesto number 2 came about in 1973.
What's the first paragraph of the Humanist Manifesto? Do you happen to know?
I don't have it in front of me.
Well, I do. Humanist Manifesto 1 is now a historical document superseded by Humanist Manifesto 2. Like the first, the second, please note this, like the first, the second document does not represent a binding creed or doctrine, but is merely a consensus statement on social policy.
Well, what I was trying to say is if you look at the history of it, you'll see exactly what happened. You see, in the 1960s, the humanists filed their briefs and claimed in the conscientious objection cases that they were a religion, because the statute provided that in order to be a conscientious objector, you had to believe in a supreme being. And they came in and said, we don't believe in a supreme being, but we have a parallel belief dealing with what Paul Tillich called the ultimate concerns of life, and that it is really a non-theistic religion, of course, which we know they're Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism are all non-theistic, or they don't believe in.
Yeah, it's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? Non-theistic religion.
Well, they don't believe in a supreme being as we traditionally believe either in Judaism or Christianity.
Well, who are they? Where do they meet?
Well,
and who are they?
Yeah, there are a number of organizations that are involved in the humanist movement. Of course, there's the American Humanist Association, there's the Ethical Culture.
Well, I thought we were talking about the humanist religion. Now, are we talking about a movement or a religion or a group of ideas?
Well, we're talking about humanists, and they break down the same as if you talk about Christians. There's Baptists and Methodists and Episcopalians and different ones. But basically, humanists believe, as I have indicated, I think most of them would agree, as I had indicated before. But what was happening was they started, the humanists came in, the Ethical Culture Societies, the American Humanist Association, and those have indicated that they are a religion, and that they should be treated as a religion.
Are a religion or are like a religion?
Well,
kind of a big difference, isn't there?
Well, they are a religion.
Oh, they are?
And
well, who heads up this religion?
Well, yeah.
What's the board of governors, or whatever it might be?
Well, in some of the humanists, out of some of their bylaws of some of the organizations, first of all, Paul Kurtz, who was instrumental in drafting Humanist Manifesto number 2 and the Declaration of Secular Humanism, has stated, and these are not my words, that unfortunately, he says, every humanist membership organization is organized as a religious organization. And then in the bylaws of some of these organizations, for instance, the American Humanist Association, they provide that to achieve their ends, they extend its principles and operate educationally. The association publishes books, magazines, and pamphlets, engages lectures, selects, trains, and accredits humanist counselors as its ordained ministry of the movement. And then, of course, they perform marriages and they do funerals. There are some cases on that where...
Well, so do judges.
What?
So do judges, and in the state of Florida, notary public.
No, but they're talking about it from a religious training standpoint.
But how can it be a religious training standpoint if there is no religion?
Well, but it is a religion. You don't see, if you get into the mindset that you have to believe in a supreme being to be a religion, then you got problems with it.
Well, if you're going to be a religion, then you've got to have some kind of doctrine, right?
Well, I indicated basically what their beliefs are.
But it says right here at the top of it, the second document does not represent a binding creed or doctrine.
Yeah. Let me go back. I was trying to go into the history a little bit with you, because there's a reason for that, and a lot of them won't agree with that, because Paul Beatty, who signed that, Ed Dorr, who signed that, said there just absolutely isn't any question that secular humanism is a religion. They don't dispute that fact at all. Ed Dorr's been around for a long time and been involved with a lot of these organizations. He's been a director on the national board of the ACLU, and he's executive director of one of the organizations that he just changed over to a new organization. But what they were concerned about was that they were going to run into the same problems that transcendental meditation did, that they claimed it was a religion for the free exercise part of the First Amendment, but they didn't want it to be a religion for the Establishment Clause because they wanted to be able to get into the schools. And those were the trends that were going in the 60s. And Paul Kurtz is sharp. When he saw what was happening, they decided that they needed to come up with another humanist manifesto. And some of the letters that they sent out, one of those that is written, The Philosophy of Humanism, is called Paulus Lamont. And in one of his letters, that they said, what do we need to change from Humanist Manifesto number 1? He said, first of all, we've got to get rid of the terms religion and religious, because we're going to run into trouble if we don't. And so that was one of their main concerns.
Humanist Manifesto is being taught in the public schools.
Well, no, I never said that. I said humanism is. And basically that's one part of it.
Well, here's let's go back to the first tenet again in the manifesto. Dogmatic or authoritarian religions that place revelation, God, ritual, or creed above human needs and experience do not do a disservice to the human species, or do a disservice, I beg your pardon, to the human species. Where do they teach that?
Well, basically what they're saying, that there's no supreme being.
Yeah, I know. Where is that taught? What school system in this country is teaching that there is no supreme being?
Through your textbooks, there's been a systematic statements in your books. As the judge said, he's not going to pick out one or two of that. But the whole thing is denigrating to the theistic religion.
No, the whole thing is that there's no place that there's not anything even remotely like that being taught, is there?
Sure.
Where?
Well, in your books, the books.
What books, sir, say that there is no God?
Pardon?
What books say there is no God?
Well, basically, they're against the theistic type of religions, or the
well, wait a second. Let's answer that question. What books in the school systems in this country say there is no God? Any of them, sir? Yes or no?
Well, I think when you take a look at some of the things that are in the books, for instance, some of the textbooks.
Are there any books in the nation's school system, sir, that say there is no God? Yes or no? That's a simple question.
I'm sure that there probably is.
You're sure that there probably is, but you can't name any.
Well, I can't name you one on that says...
Can you name the... could you even give me the state? Could you even give me the state where a school book like that is being used?
They're not that dumb. They're pretty clever. What they would say is, for instance, where, as I indicated before, the history in the social studies books, they really agreed that they made short shrift of religion, and that was not a problem. So those that would criticize Judge Hand on those really have no basis for it, because there was no evidence, except even their own witnesses testified to. Where the battleground was is on the home economics books. And those were the ones that used to teach sewing and cooking, but now have what they call quality of life.
For example?
Well, then some of the students said, when are we going to get rid of this garbage of quality of life and get down to sewing and cooking? Here's an example is, in one of those, is people who have strong prejudices are called bigots. Bigots are devoted to their own church and will not consider the rights of others to have varying opinions.
But it's actually a little more than that, isn't it? I mean, it does mention religion, but it also mentions some other things with bigots,
well,
doesn't it?
Well, it mentions some other things.
Yeah, like, racial...
No, it doesn't say that.
It doesn't?
No, bigots...
Funny, the paragraph that I read out of that book did.
I'll give you the exact quote. People, and of course, the media and the radio stations usually only take ones that say, you've got to be you, and some of those statements, but people who have strong prejudices are called bigots. Bigots are devoted to their own church, party, or belief, and will not consider the right of others.
Oh, that's a lot different than their own church, isn't it? Party or belief. Varying
opinions. And then the ones that say, do not say God took Daddy away because he wants Daddy to be with him in heaven. And it goes on from there to sort of make fun of those who would.
You would like the schools to teach that Daddy is in heaven?
No, but I don't think you should. I don't think you should run it down. If you're going to run it down, then you have to give the other view.
Can you prove there's a heaven, sir?
Well, but I don't think that's the question.
Oh, I think it is a question.
No,
if you can't prove that something exists, then I don't want it taught.
Well, if people have beliefs, and they're sincerely held religious beliefs, then the school system isn't the place to run those down. Or if you're going to run those down, you ought to give their views fairly as well.
Well, could we go back again over that thing that you say is running it down? Could I hear that again?
Well, one of those says, do not say God took Daddy away because he wants him to be in heaven. When Gary Simon was growing up, his father used to tell him there was a sin against God to tell a lie. Of course, today Gary works to teach his own son honesty, and he doesn't tell his son that God will punish him for lying. I'm not sure what that has to do with home economics, but I would think that if you're going to have something like that, there ought to be something as to whether telling a lie is right or wrong. And I have no problem with having a marketplace.
Well, it goes on a little bit more than that and gives some examples about lying, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know what I had all those. I don't have all my files here. I don't recall any that went on beyond that, except it did talk about shoplifting and things. And
which it said, of course, was wrong.
Well, it starts out, but then you've really got to decide whether you're the employer or you're the employee or what you are. You decide yourself what's right or wrong.
Well, let me ask you this, sir. If you were starving, absolutely starving, and your family was starving, you had no money and you couldn't borrow any and you couldn't get anything in the way of charity, would you go into the 7-Eleven tonight and perhaps pick up a can of beans and walk out the door to feed your family, to keep them from dropping dead tonight?
If I did that
well, would you, sir?
Wrong. I think if I had that problem, I would go to someone and tell them what my problem is.
Well, suppose nobody would help you. Would you go into the 7-Eleven to keep your family alive and pick up that can of beans and walk out the door? Yes or no?
Well, I think you're getting far afield.
No, I'm not getting far afield. Can't you answer the question?
Well,
yes or no? Would you or wouldn't you?
Stealing is wrong.
Yeah, I know you tell me that stealing is wrong, but would you go in there and pick up that can of beans to keep your family alive?
Well, but see, now you're getting into the values.
Can't you answer that question, sir?
No, I think you're stealing.
Well, you may be stealing, but can you tell me whether or not you would do it?
Well, I wouldn't steal.
You wouldn't steal? You'd let your family die?
Well, but that's not the question.
Yes, it is the question.
No.
Yes, it's the question I've raised.
No.
You would let your family die, or you would pick up the can of beans?
Well, let me ask you a few questions.
Well, let me tell you why you won't answer, because the answer is yes. And then the response to that is there are no values and absolutes, are there, sir?
Sure there are. If you don't believe that, then you got the law of the jungle. Because my
can't begin to imagine,
my
sir.
values are just as good as yours.
I can't begin to imagine the kind of idiot it must have been on the other side of the council table in that court, because I'm a high school dropout, sir, and I can shoot, holes through this in
I'm sure
20 minutes.
I'm sure you
can. There aren't any absolutes, are there, sir?
Well, I just told you there were.
Yeah, I know you told me there were, but you also wouldn't answer the question as to whether or not you would let your family starve.
I told you I would not steal.
And therefore you would let your family starve.
Well, if I committed a sin, I would ask for forgiveness.
25 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock, my guest, Robert Skolrood, will continue the interview. 28.5 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock, my guest, the Executive Director and General Counsel of the National Legal Foundation, Robert K. Skolrood. The foundation is located in Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's the same area that the 700 Club is located in. Is that pure coincidence?
No.
No?
No. It was the National Legal Foundation was founded the same as the Christian Broadcast Network by Pat Robertson. However, he is not an officer or director in the National Legal Foundation.
Where does your funding come from?
Some of it comes, a great deal of it comes from private donations, and some of it comes from CBN.
Approximately how much?
Oh, I don't know the percentage.
Half?
I don't know the percentages, but initially when it started, a major part of it came from that, and we're working toward becoming wholly supported outside of CBN.
According to the biography that I have here, the foundation is working to mount an effort to project a common legal philosophy designed to reclaim the rule of law in the United States based upon biblical principles. Which biblical principles did you have in mind?
Well, and the biblical principles that, you know, the moral values that we have, we go back to the Ten Commandments and also Christ's teaching.
The Ten Commandments. Well, four of those Ten Commandments deal directly with religion. For example, you would like to see it law in this country that everybody attend church on Sunday?
No, it doesn't say that. But it says you shall have no other gods before me. And what I would indicate that, you know, hopefully through persuasion.
There should only be one God.
That's right.
I see. Your God.
But I think that...
Not the God of the Buddhist, not the God of the Muslim, but your God.
Well, but I don't mean that by enforcement. I mean by persuasion that, you know, that what I have is the truth, and I would hope that I could persuade you that it is the truth.
And if you can't persuade me, you'd like to get it into the schools. If you can't persuade me, you'd like to get to my children.
No, what I would feel that education should be the marketplace of ideas, but that one particular group or one particular type of indoctrination shouldn't be given a preferred position to indoctrinate over the others. Either they all ought to compete together, or else take them out. But I think that's the worst way. I think they all ought to be able to compete, because that's what we're talking about.
Mr. Skolrood,
getting an education.
Do you have any children?
Do I?
Yes.
Yes.
What school do they attend?
Well, they've all graduated.
What schools did they attend?
Well,
did they attend public or private schools?
They attended mostly public school.
Do you know about Mr. Robertson's children, where they went to school?
I have no idea.
Private school, wasn't it?
I honestly don't know.
And your children did, at least in part, attend private schools as well?
No, I have 4 children. 2 of them attended public schools, I think, completely, and all the others public schools except for maybe a year.
I'm still very interested in which biblical principles. You know, you've already told me one God. How about...
I just don't believe in murder. I don't believe...
Well, nobody believes in murder, sir.
But, and then we're talking adultery.
Nobody believes in adultery either.
Oh, well, the humanists...
You know, everybody commits it, but nobody believes in it.
Paul Kurtz doesn't have any problem with that.
Well, Paul Kurtz is one individual, sir. I'm sure, you know, we could also find an individual who believed in murder, too.
But he certainly does a lot of speaking for the humanists.
Well, he's an American, sir. He's allowed to speak.
Well, I know.
But because he speaks doesn't mean that people believe in adultery who listen to him, does it?
Pardon?
Just because he speaks doesn't mean that the people who listen to him believe in adultery, does it?
Well, I think that's one of the... they don't have any problem with that. He says that if you don't believe in making it with somebody else, it shows you what kind of hang-ups you have even outside of the conjugal bed. And there are a lot of the humanists that believe that.
Yes, there are, sir.
Pardon?
Yes, there are. There are an awful lot of people who also profess a belief in your God that believe and act the same way, too, including many members of your clergy.
Sure, I don't deny that.
So therefore, I assume all Christians who listen to, for example, Jim Bakker, must also believe in adultery.
Well,
I mean, using the same logic.
Yeah, I think they would recognize, certainly they ought to recognize that it's a sin. And certainly we have a forgiving God.
Well, I think an awful lot of humanists recognize that adultery is wrong.
Well, but they don't have any problems or hang-ups with it.
What do you mean they don't have any problems or hang-ups with it? Some people might not have any problems or hang-ups with it, but don't you dare label everybody who doesn't believe exactly as you do in the same category. That's not fair, sir.
I've not done that.
You just said they.
No, but you've done that. I'm talking about the humanists.
You have just labeled everyone who is a quote-unquote non-believer in your God as someone who favors adultery, which is an utterly absurd statement.
Said that. You said that, but I didn't say that. I said...
Would you like me to play the tape back for you, sir?
I said that people like Paul Kurtz don't have any problem with that. He's one of the main spokespersons for humanism.
Well, you know, Jim Bakker doesn't have any problem with it either, and he's one of the main spokesmen for Christianity. So therefore, are we to assume that all Christians feel the same way?
Well, and I think a lot of Christians, we all have clay feet. We're not perfect. We're not Christ.
Well, I guess a lot of humanists aren't perfect either and have clay feet.
Well, no, but for a Christian, they should believe in the absolute values, that it is wrong.
But we already have established, sir, that there aren't any absolute values.
And that it is a sin, and they need to ask God for forgiveness, and He's a forgiving God. But I don't think with the humanists, of course, that isn't a concern of theirs.
What isn't a concern of theirs, sir?
Well, it wouldn't be considered a sin for them, and they would certainly not have any problem with that.
Well, of course they'd have a problem with it. It's wrong, sir.
Well, but
it's wrong. You see, apparently you're telling me that the humanist who is against adultery because it hurts somebody else. However, the Christian who's against adultery is only against adultery because God will throw him in the lake of fire. It has nothing whatsoever to do with whether or not it's going to hurt someone else's feelings, destroy a marriage, ruin children, ruin families, etc., etc. It's only because God's going to throw him in the lake of fire.
I agree with this, that is all wrong, but that's not what Paul Kurtz would tell you.
I don't care about Paul Kurtz, sir. Paul Kurtz doesn't speak for me or for anyone else except a handful of lunatics.
But I don't want to speak for him. I want you to listen to what they're saying. Making it with another male is not unlike playing football or gin rummy, he says.
Yeah, he says. That's a big difference between he and they, isn't it? When you say they, you label all humanists.
Well, but he's one of the main spokesmen for the humanists. And most of them...
Sir, there are no spokesmen for humanists.
Pardon?
There are no spokesmen for humanists.
Well, okay.
And there's no organization, there's no church, there's no meetings, there's no nothing, there's no hierarchy, there is no body of humanists. So how can you have a spokesman, sir, when you don't have an organization?
Well, but you do have organizations. There are all sorts of them. And I've already gone over some of them, but you don't want to believe it. So then
What do you mean I don't want to believe it?
If you take that tact, then I can't.
Well, the main...
You've already come to a conclusion that and made up your mind, so I can't help you there.
Well, sir, the main organization that you named is the American Humanist Association, and there is nothing in their literature at all.
There's the Ethical Culture Society, and there's the Human Potential Movement, and there's Humanistic Judaism, and there's Unitarian Universalist Churches, which is the main feeding ground.
Well, let me enlighten you with what the American Humanist Association says about sexuality. It is the sixth tenet. In the area of sexuality, we believe that intolerant attitudes often cultivated by orthodox religions and puritanical cultures unduly repress sexual conduct. The right to birth control, abortion, and divorce should be recognized. While we do not approve of exploitive, denigrating forms of sexual expression, neither do we wish to prohibit by law or social sanctions sexual behavior between consenting adults. The many varieties of sexual exploitation should not in themselves be considered evil. You have a main problem with that, sir? With consenting adults? You want to tell consenting adults what to do?
For sure. I think that we've got a lot of voices out there that are not particularly Christians that would tell you that the moral decline in America is going to be ruinous to it.
Well, what do you mean by moral decline? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
But if consenting adults can do what they want, I think T.S. Eliot, one of our great poets, has indicated that once you have a decline in private morality, then it's just a short hop to your public morality.
Well, could you give me some examples of what, if you had your way, the law would read, or how the law would read?
Well, to me, I think adultery is wrong. We got along pretty well for years in this country until the last few years when all of these things came about, mainly from the 60s on. And we had a country that people gave their lives to get over here to because of the religious liberty that we had and the way that it was created.
And you would certainly like to do away with that religious liberty, wouldn't you?
No, that's exactly what I am trying to impress upon you that we need.
Well, let me see if I have this correct. You're for freedom of religion, but you're not for freedom from religion.
That's right.
I see.
We're talking about freedom of religion.
But not freedom from religion. You're not interested in that at all.
What's that?
Freedom from religion.
No, we're talking about freedom of religion. In other words, I don't want the court telling me they can take my religion away from me, that I got to be free from my own religion.
How would you feel about if, let's say you live in Virginia Beach, how would you feel if tomorrow on the buses in Virginia Beach running up and down, I guess it's Atlantic Avenue is the main street right along the beach there?
Yes.
If somebody put up a placard on that bus that had a crucifix on it, inside of a circle and a slash through the crucifix, how'd you feel about that? Would that offend you?
Well, it depends upon if they allow the opposite viewpoint as well.
So you have no problem whatsoever with that symbol?
I would personally be offended.
Would you like to see it removed?
Well, if it's a public forum and they allows the contrary views, then I think they ought to have the right to their expression of those views, but not at the exclusion of my views.
And you would do nothing, assuming that on the other side of the bus they allowed a similar placard with a crucifix on it, and you would do nothing whatsoever to stop that one with a circle and a slash through it.
Well, I wouldn't like it, but I wouldn't take any action against it. I mean, because I think the person has that right to make that free expression, even though I would strongly disagree with it.
Let me ask you to stand by. I must take another.
The Daily Diary of the American Dream.
The time, my guest, Robert K. Skolrood, the Executive Director and General Counsel of the National Legal Foundation, located in Virginia Beach, Virginia, the organization that was instrumental in the Alabama book banning case. Would you like to take some phone calls? Mr. Skolrood?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Fine, yeah.
Tampa, you're on the air at WPLP. Hello, Tampa.
Just dodging questions.
Tampa, are you there?
Yeah. I just like to tell your guest he's damn good at dodging questions.
St. Petersburg, you're on there at WPLP. Hello.
Let me talk to your guest for a minute.
Go right ahead.
Can you tell me if using the Peloponnesus as a borderline is Christianity an Eastern or Western religion?
I didn't catch the word he said.
Peloponnesus, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, he's got me. I don't know what that is.
It's Christianity.
Got me, too.
Do you know, Bob?
No, sir. What's the point?
He said it. He makes it sound like Christianity is a Western religion. It's not. It's an Eastern religion.
Well, thank you for clearing that up for us. Clearwater, you're on the air at WPLP.
Yes, sir. I'd like to ask a question of your guest.
Go right ahead, please.
Do I understand something that I read, whether it was a dream or what, that our books that have been published in this country, recent vintage, have been so good in the area of the non-denominational, atheistic approach toward, what do you call it, non-anything, that they've adopted these things and they've taken them to Russia and reprinted them and said, hey, why do we have to redo this because it's so good? Have you heard about that?
I haven't heard anything like that.
Well, to Mr. Lassiter, then, have you heard about it?
No, sir, I have not.
Not on your Apple computer?
Well, no, sir, it's not on my Apple computer.
Perhaps what I'm trying to say here, then, is that it appears, I know that I read this thing. I don't get rag papers either. And, but it appears that what we have done here, Mr. Lassiter, is we have completely cut off the flow of the fluid to the tree and killing all the branches that we've had because of this thing called secular humanism being predominant. It's being predominant now. We're not talking about a neutrality. We're talking about predominance.
No, sir, we're talking about your ignorance with secular humanism. You obviously don't know what is in the Humanist Manifesto, because if you did, sir, you would know that it is quite contrary to communism.
Oh, no, sir.
Oh, really?
No, sir, it is not.
I see. Do you have a copy, sir?
It's very supportive of Marxism.
No, it's not very supportive of Marxism.
Yeah, no, it is.
Well, name something in there, sir, that's supportive of Marxism.
But Paul Kurtz would tell you that the greatest humanist of the 20th...
Yeah, well, we already know that Paul Kurtz is a lunatic.
Well, then I tell him Paul Kurtz is no dummy. He testified at the trial. He's a very bright guy.
Well, he may be, but we also know he's a lunatic with some of his ideas.
Well, that may be, but he's the one that was one of the chief drafters of Humanist Manifesto number 2. But he considers Marx the greatest humanist of the last century. Of
course, Marx was a theoretician, wasn't he?
Well, Marx was a theoretician, but then when they picked up from Marxism after that, I think probably Paul Kurtz would have some problems.
I mean, as an example, the 8th tenet in the Humanist Manifesto, we are committed to an open and democratic society. We must extend participatory democracy in a true sense to the economy, the school, the family, the workplace, and the voluntary associations. That doesn't sound like communism to me, does it?
Well, but part of that is self-serving, as I said, to move off of Humanist Manifesto number 2, which really openly advocated socialism. And they moved off of the socialism thing. But Paul Kurtz would tell you that Marxism in its purest form would probably be the greatest form of humanism.
It advocates socialism. Well, then how about the 10th provision? Humane society should evaluate economic systems not by rhetoric or ideology, but by whether or not they increase economic well-being for all individuals and groups, minimize poverty and hardship, and increase the sum of human satisfaction and enhance the quality of life. You'd be against that, sir?
Well, but when you're talking about guys like Paul Kurtz and others, they've got their own views. They say they don't have to agree to all of those things.
Well, they don't have to agree to all. Well, that's the Humanist Manifesto. So I guess that your gripe is with Paul Kurtz, isn't it?
You told me before they don't all agree to that.
Your gripe is with Paul Kurtz, then, isn't it?
No,
not with secular humanism.
Well, all I can do is take the main spokespeople for it.
And I guarantee you that 95% of this audience has never heard of Paul Kurtz.
Well, I don't know, but he was the chief drafter of two of their most well-known documents of which you're reading from. And
these seem to be quite contrary, sir, to what you're saying that he believes in.
I don't want to tell you what I think, and I want to tell you what he's saying, because I think that's the best way to understand those.
Well, then if he is the main...
with like Corliss Lamont, who, of course, has been accused of being a communist and fellow traveler, who's one of the...
Whoa. We're not going to get involved. This isn't a John Birch show, sir. We're not going to get involved with fellow travelers.
Well,
save that for a show in Virginia. It doesn't play here.
Sidney Hook, Paul Kurtz said, is the greatest secular humanist living.
Well, you said that Paul Kurtz, sir, is the draftsman of this document.
Sidney Hook's newest book about Corliss Lamont.
Well, sir, you said that Paul Kurtz is the draftsman of this document, so therefore I have to assume, reading from this document, that when a man says we are committed to an open and democratic society, he is not advocating communism.
Well, what he may say and what he does and what he wants to get done...
Oh, you know what he thinks.
Are two different things. Because, as I said, you could see the history developing through the 60s that the bent that humanism was on was going to run smack dab into the First Amendment. And he had to avoid that. And Humanist Manifesto number 2, to a great extent, is self-serving to duck some of those issues. But in practice, they continue some of the same things that they did before. And they... in their magazine, the Humanist magazines, they said we've got to make the classroom our pulpit, the same as any fundamentalist preacher, and we got to get in there with
the Humanist magazine,
sir, as zealous as any fundamentalist preacher, because the classroom is our pulpit.
Sir, the Humanist magazine is a collection of many people's writings, isn't it?
Well, but I
mean, there is no real editorial policy at the Humanist magazine, is there? It's just kind of a collection.
Well, but
of all kinds of people, some of them wackos.
Apply that to everybody's things, and I guess all I can say is that that's one of the magazines in which they claim that they put out their materials and their beliefs.
No, sir, it's where they publish.
By what they say.
It's where they publish people.
Pardon?
It's where they publish people, some of them wackos and weirdos, by their own admission.
Then you got to tell them that, because I don't...
No, you don't, sir. They'll admit it to you. They'll tell you that
if you ask.
They
won't agree with you on that.
I beg your pardon. They've sat across this table from me and said the exact same words.
Well, it depends upon who's saying that, I guess.
The president of the Humanist Association, the American Humanist Association, has sat at this table and told me that they publish things that they wish they hadn't.
Well,
they publish things that they're embarrassed about.
Yeah,
but they publish them because they're a free publication.
Sure, some of those have said that Christians are lunatics and morons, and they ought to not be allowed to have children the same as lunatics and morons, and some of the laws are in some of the states.
Well, sir, when you tell me that you would like to see the laws of the United States so written that people had to believe in your God, I have no problem saying...
I just want my God to have a fair shake.
Oh, sir, I beg your pardon, but you did tell me earlier in this conversation when I was referring to the rule of law in the United States based upon biblical principles.
Sure,
you told me unequivocally that, and I even went back and double-checked on that, you told me unequivocally, sir, that you would like to see your God, the required God.
No, I never said that.
Find it on the tape, Michael.
I would like, through my persuasion, to convince you that mine is the truth. But I'm willing to let that meet in the marketplace of ideas, I said, to persuade you that my truth is the truth.
Well, we're going to go back and check it on the tape to see which one of us is right. So you do not want that biblical principle, then, in the law?
Forcing anything on anyone from either side. But I do not want one side to have a dominant position to indoctrinate over all the others. And I'm willing to let my truth beat whatever anybody else claims is their truth in the marketplace of ideas.
Well, sir, when I asked you the question, you said, I want the 10 Commandments. And so I said,
Well, no, but you asked me what some of the absolutes were that I believed in.
Well, that was another part of the conversation. When we were talking about what biblical principles you would like to see law in this country, you said the 10 Commandments. And I said...
Well,
Which ones?
My recollection of it was you asked me what were some of the absolutes and that, and I said that 10 Commandments would be some of them.
So you would like to see the 10 Commandments as part of the law in this country?
I would say that I would like to persuade you that is, and those are absolute values, and those are important.
Well, there's a big difference. There's a big difference between biblical principles as law and you're persuading me, sir. There's a real big difference. Because in here it says reclaim the rule of law in the U.S. based upon biblical principles.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the biblical principles is that there is but one God, your God. Is that one of the principles you would like to see as the rule of law?
That would be one of the principles that I would like to persuade you that ought.
Then you wouldn't want to see it as rule of law.
What?
Then you would not want to see it as rule of law.
Well, I don't think you want to take it in the literal sense, but I think that I would like to be able to persuade you that the rule of law within America that some of those would be based on those absolutes.
Well, sir, I'm only reading from your biographical sketch. Together, they are, speaking of your organization, mounting an effort to project a common legal philosophy designed to reclaim the rule of law in the United States based upon biblical principles.
Right.
So there are some biblical principles you would leave out, then, in that rule of law.
Well, no, I don't. I wouldn't leave out any of them.
Oh, you wouldn't leave out the biblical principles in the rule of law, so therefore you would have one God.
No, not in my practice. I would like to develop...
Sir, do you have any idea what it is that you're trying to accomplish or do?
Well, I'm trying to say that humanism is bad for America.
Sorry. How about the biblical principle of keeping the Sabbath holy? Would you like to see that as part of the rule of law as well?
Well, I personally would, yes. But if somebody else doesn't want to agree with that, they have the right not to agree with it. But I'd like to be able to persuade and convince them of that.
Well, make up your mind. You want to persuade them or see it as a rule of law?
Well, I'd like to persuade them so it would become a rule of law.
Oh. How about the biblical principle about keeping holy the name of God? Would you like to see it a rule of law that people could not say, oh, God?
I would basically give you the same answer on all of them.
So you would like to see the 10 Commandments as law in this nation?
Yes, I guess I would. I'd like to persuade you that is worthy of becoming a rule of law.
Thank you, sir. Michael, you need look no further. Seminole, you're on the air at WPLP.
Well, thank you. Mr. Lassiter, you have a wonderful program, but there's so many people argue about something they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I believe if you live and let live and not be so greedy and treat everybody as a friend, I think we'd all be better off. And I do think there is something good in every religion. Do you agree?
There's something good in every religion? Yeah,
Yes.
I suppose there is something good in every religion.
There is, and who are we to say that you're right and I'm wrong or whatever? I am a Protestant. I was married to a Scotsman. He died. I married a Catholic. And I went to church with him, and he went to church with me. And I believe that we make our hell on earth.
Well, thank you very much. St. Pete, you're on the air at WPLP.
Yes. Mr. Lassiter, listen to the program tonight and listen to some of the people that are stating their beliefs and things. A lot of these churches, when they came to the country, they took the Indians, they were heathens. The Spanish, they were heathens. They sent missionaries in, they tried to change everybody's beliefs to go their own way, which is still the way they're trying to do it.
It was my understanding that the forefathers who came to this country came to escape people like Mr. Skolrood back in the old country who said there is but one God, there is but one church.
Well, I think everybody's got their own belief. And if a man believes that there's a moon god and a rain god and a sun god, if that works for him, then damn it, let it work for him. There's no sense in trying to dominate everybody with one people's belief. It cannot work.
That's our point.
Oh, really, Mr. Skolrood?
Well, that's what we're saying. I've said it several times that you can't have one position in a preferred, one belief in a position that's preferred to indoctrinate all the others.
I mean, some of the things that I assume that you disagree with because they were in the packet that you sent me were, for example, from today's teen, too strict a conscience may make you afraid to try new ventures and meet new people. You disagree with that?
Sure, but you have to put it in the rest of the context that they have here, because basically those home economics books, what they're trying to do is they're trying to separate you from the beliefs of your family, from the values of your family, from the values of the church, and you start out with you or you. And the studies have shown that those people come down to a value system of the peers, which leaves them wide open to drug usage and sexual promiscuity.
I see. You also would disagree with we can direct our own lives instead of letting others do the directing for us. Each of us can become the kind of person we want to be.
Well, I think when you put that into the context, the idea is you shuck the baggage of your church. You do your family, because most of those, they put up your bulletin boards and set up the conflicts between your parents and that, and you got to make your own decision. Don't come in with any, as they values clarification people say, any moralizing crap into the room with you. You make up your own mind. And as I say, the studies show that what it comes down to is there's no right and wrong, and they're very clear about that. And what you do is you come down to the values of the group.
No, I think what they're trying to say is that right and wrong sometimes changes.
No, values of the family and of the church over the years, the value that they've proven to be, and make fun of those and say, ignore all those. Now you're going to start out right from here, because we're going to re-indoctrinate you. And this business of all the myths of God or anything else, you've got to junk all that stuff.
Well, Mr. Skolrood, you're one of the most remarkable individuals I've ever met. You have an ability to read between the lines unlike anyone I've ever met before. I'm out of time for this hour. I thank you much for being my guest. CBS News coming up next. We shall return with 2 open hours. Please don't venture very far. 7 minutes after the hour of 9 o'clock. Welcome back. Second hour on this Tuesday, May the 5th, 1987. Lassiter with you until 11. I just can't begin to imagine what kind of an attorney it was that headed up the opposition that squared off with that last guest on this program in the courtroom in Alabama. Can't begin to imagine who the clod was. One more time, a simple-minded man with great ideas as to how you should lead your life and just how things should run. As a matter of fact, speaking of simple-minded men who know what's best for you, how appropriate it is that we now find out the big guy is going on an offensive again. The big guy, of course, for the benefit of those of you who are not regular listeners to this program, our beloved leader, Ronald Wilson Reagan, going out on the offensive again for his beloved freedom fighters. Who the hell are these people? Does anybody know? What is their plan if they win? Does anybody know? I know. Details. They're against the commies, so therefore they must be good guys. You know, I sat there today watching on CNN, although it's my understanding was also on all of the other major networks in this country, the first day of the Iran-Contra hearings in Washington, D.C., listening to a good man, listening to an honorable man, listening to a patriotic man, and retired Air Force General Secord, who never bothered apparently to ask, who the hell are they? What's their plan if they win? Never dawned on him, apparently, to ask those questions. And apparently it hasn't dawned on Ronald Reagan. I am so incredibly tired of listening to pro-Reagan, pro-fascist, anti-communist paranoids, especially when they have foreign accents. And we seem to have run into quite a string of them in the last week or so on this program. People who may or may not even be citizens in this country, telling me what my country should do in some other region of the world. I'm still waiting to hear just what it is that is going to happen because some dirt poor nation turns to the left. I'm still waiting to hear just what awful, terrible calamity is to befall me and my nation because some other nation that has tried the right for the last 100 years or so is now trying the left. We've had a relationship with the nation of Nicaragua for over 100 years. 100 years of defending and promoting right-wing dictators in that nation. Not promoting democracy, but promoting right-wing dictators. And after 100 years plus, there are still many areas of that country without clean water, electricity, sanitation, medical care, education. And the same is true of most every other nation in that region. That is what they have to show for 100 years plus of following our way. And I, for one, am a little sick and tired of seeing anti-communist hysteria in this country to the point of bending and breaking our very own laws. I'm tired of seeing noses being thumbed at the Constitution and the governmental process in this nation. I'm tired of covert, questionable activities that are encouraged by the administration. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of the deception. I'm tired of the deceit. I'm tired of hearing stories about U.S. citizens traveling freely to a nation with which we maintain diplomatic relations, have no travel restrictions whatsoever, a nation where you are free to come and go as you damned well please. I'm sick and tired of seeing U.S. citizens, when returning from that nation, being interrogated and intimidated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And that's what happens to you if you're a U.S. citizen and you go to Nicaragua. Or that's what happens to you if you're a U.S. citizen and you write one too many letters to Nicaragua or receive one too many letters from Nicaragua. You get a knock on the door. Hello, Special Agent Jones here. Federal Bureau of Investigation. There is no declaration of war in Nicaragua, yet we wage a surrogate war down there. And I'm also a little sick and tired of your apathy in the matter. It is your apathy that killed Ben Linder last week. Your apathy, your failure to ask questions. What in the hell are we doing there? What's supposed to happen if we're not there? Who the hell are these people? What do they plan on doing if they win? What do you mean restore democracy? There never was democracy there, Mr. President. Ever. How ready, willing, and able you are to run off half-cocked to support something about which you know absolutely nothing. How sure you are that you know all about communism. Well, let's take a simple little test here. Let's just sit down and take a simple little test and see how much you know about life in a communist nation, okay? Did you know that you can own your own home in Russia? You can. Did you know that you can own your own business in Poland? I'll bet you didn't, did you? Did you know that you can own commercial real estate in Yugoslavia? Do you know how many gunship helicopters the Russians have sent to Nicaragua? 10. You don't know very much, do you? And yet you're all ready, willing, and able to support that president because he stands there with tears in his eyes saying, oh, Marxist government down there is against labor unions and a free press. Have you tried establishing a labor union in Florida recently? Or publishing a newspaper that calls for the overthrow of the government? Have you tried those things recently? See what happens to you if you try. In this great land of the free, this great democracy, the United States of America. Try publishing a newspaper that calls for the overthrow of the government and see what happens to you. Try standing on the street corner passing out leaflets that calls for the overthrow of the government and see what happens to you. Do you know how many political prisoners there are in this country? Oh, I know. You say none. Wrong. They just arrested about 12.5 of them last week from the White Patriots Party. And I'm frankly damn glad they did. But their crimes are mainly political. They don't like the government or anything about it, and they want to see it overthrown, and they advocate the overthrow of the government. They're political prisoners. We got lots of them. We have hundreds from Puerto Rico alone. Political prisoners. Do you have any idea what this nation's track record is in Central America? Any idea at all? Do you know how many times we have sent in the Marines to protect U.S. business interests in foreign lands? Do you know how many times we have sent in the Marines to collect debts in foreign lands? Thought nothing of it. In Central and South America, do you have any idea? Do you know about Panama and that canal that we gave away? That our beloved President Ronald Wilson Reagan tells us that we gave away? Do you know how Panama became established? You know, it wasn't there before the turn of the century. It didn't exist. It was part of Colombia. And we stole it from them. Did you know that? Do you have any idea why most Central and South American governments are at odds with the Catholic Church? Do you have any idea at all? Any idea at all? Has nothing to do with freedom of religion. Has to do with population. That's one of the main gripes that most of the governments have with the Catholic Church in Central and South America. The priests and the bishops are there saying, bang out them babies, bang out them babies. The governments are saying, we can't feed what we have. We can't clothe what we have. We can't employ what we have. And the church says, oh, details, details. Have them babies. Have them babies. Did you know that? Do you have any idea what percentage of the land is owned by the people in those backwater, dirt-poor nations? 5% of the people own the land in most cases. 5%, 95%. Not only don't own land, but couldn't buy it if they tried. Have you ever seen a wealthy South American and his entourage in this country? I have. Let me tell you about it. See, there are lots and lots of them in Miami, and I, of course, used to live down there. They come with bodyguards and indentured servants. It's a real treat to watch them walking down the street. You get on to Coconut Grove in Miami on a Sunday afternoon. You'll see a man, usually relatively young, 35, 40 years old. The husband, the head of the family. He's walking surrounded by 2 or 3 armed bodyguards. And he's walking a couple of paces ahead of his wife. And behind her come the children, and behind the children come the nannies and the maids and the valets. You ever seen that? Have you ever seen the pictures of the starving children in Central and South America? You ought to see how the wealthy live. You ought to see how the wealthy live. You ought to see the jewelry. You ought to see the cars, the homes, the shopping sprees. Do you have any sense of the political and economic conditions in the so-called democracies in Central and South America? Any sense at all? Do you have any idea at all about the political and economic conditions down there? Do you think you should be blindly following a president who glosses over these realities and asking for your support to wage a war? Did you know that what we're really talking about is a class struggle, not a political struggle? It's a class struggle. It has nothing to do with politics. What it has to do with is 100+ years of being screwed. And all of a sudden somebody comes along, perhaps carrying a machine gun made in East Germany, perhaps carrying a machine gun made in America, with green fatigues on, and talking about a better life, talking about a little bit of hope. Did you know that for the most part, the schools and the hospitals are private in that area of the world and are open only to those who can afford them? Did you know that the right-wingers in that area don't think it's their job to help make education and medical care available to the poor? Does that sound familiar? Or that penniless, landless peasants are told they should pull themselves up by the bootstraps? Does that sound familiar? Judging from his record here at home with the press and organized labor and education and the poor, etc., whose side do you think Ronald Reagan is really on? The people or the ruling class? Whose side do you think we should be on? Why don't you speak out? What the hell are you waiting for? Are you waiting till they send your kid down there to restore the ruling class? And they send him back home in a cardboard box? With a cheery little mimeographed note from the president? Saying how proud he is that your son died fighting and for and defending democracy? Is that what you're waiting for? It's what you waited for in Southeast Asia. Do you think it is likely that the people who drove out the ruling class are now going to sit down at a negotiating table and bargain? Or to put it another way, give the ruling class back their power? Ronald Reagan does. He says that's his objective. What do you think the odds are? And he doesn't care. He actually does not care how many civilians die, nor what kind of hardship he inflicts on the civilian population to restore the right-wing ruling class to power. Nor does he have any problem with hoodwinking you or in flaunting our own laws to achieve that end. And if you don't believe that, then tune in tomorrow and watch the second day of the hearings. You will not hear a word about democracy. You will not hear a word about education, medical care, water, agriculture, electricity, housing, sanitation. The real needs in Central and South America. You won't hear a word about that, but you will hear how members of the administration, former members of the administration, members of the military, former members of the military, and the right-wing ruling class in this nation profited, made money, and went on ego and power trips, fostering and spreading war in Central and South America. What the hell are you going to do about it? Let me give you the phone numbers. Hillsborough, 224-0057. Pinellas, 393-0057.
Who have told me that people have come around and inquired about me, which I'm sure it's the FBI.
We literally sent American Marines in the early part of this century into Nicaragua.
Yes, sir.
We spilled American blood. U.S. Marines were killed in an invasion of Nicaragua to collect on bonds held by a handful of wealthy Americans. Right. We squeezed the nation of Nicaragua and took poor, starving people and made their lives more miserable and forced the Nicaraguans to repay those bonds when they didn't have the money.
Right. The last letter I wrote, which was last week, to Reagan, I ended it up by telling him I have much more respect for Mr. Ortega than I do for you. I told him that in plain English.
Well, I have no respect for either of them. They're both thugs, one on the right, one on the left.
Neither do I, Bob. But I have more respect for Ortega than I do Ronald Reagan. To me, he is a farce, a fake, a hypocrite, and he has done the things during his terms of office here which we will have to live with, I'm afraid, for a long time to come, that will reflect back and ahead to our children. I have done what I have been able to do in writing letters, but, you know, I have had one or two of those letters handed over to the State Department. They answered them with the usual old lines, you know, propaganda BS. But I agree with you 100% in why in the world that the people of this country can't understand and realize what we're doing and the errors that we're making and the policies that we've followed down there, and not only in Nicaragua but elsewhere. United Fruit Company, you know, you remember how they used to support them?
Mm-hmm. Still do.
Oh, yes.
Still do.
Disgrace, and I honestly am ashamed. I'm a veteran of World War II. I spent 5 years in the service, 3 years of it overseas, and honest to goodness, I am ashamed of what's going on.
with the Reagan administration today.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Bob, and God bless you.
29 minutes after the hour of 9 o'clock. How I love to hear the simple-minded, and some of them sitting behind this microphone, just scream and shout, oh, they have this massive army in Nicaragua. Oh, this is terrible. Obviously, their intent is to take over all the other countries. Well, you too would call for a massive army in your nation had your harbors been mined. Had the president of another nation said he wanted your military overthrow. Had the president of that same nation built a massive military base on your border. Had the president of that same nation amassed an army on your border, and had the president of that same nation waged a surrogate war for the last half dozen years, I think you'd be a little paranoid too and would have a damn big army. Wouldn't you? Or hadn't you thought of it that way? St. Pete, you're on the air at WPLP.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
How are you tonight?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Hey, I tell you what, the most peculiar thing that occurs to me about this whole situation is the American people in general seem to have a vast misunderstanding of how those people live, what their lives are like, and what their attitudes are. I've been to several different places outside the United States, and these people don't exactly have it good, and so often we're busy judging what their political attitude is when they really don't have any time to be all that involved in politics.
No, they're involved in a class struggle.
Yeah, a class struggle.
And daily survival.
Absolutely. I visited the island of Jamaica, and I found that in general the population there, the people that I met were wonderful people, but they still had a problem with the white people. Excuse me, I'm sorry, that I think it's partially racist issue too, that they were running the show and these other people were not, and they were great people. There was no reason for them to be suppressed. I've been in Mexico. I wouldn't go back. I felt so bad. And when I come back here and I try to talk to people about how bad so many of those people live, well, I'm too sensitive, or I'm some kind of subversive or something. You know, they have no understanding of compassion whatsoever.
When you think about how it used to be in places like Nicaragua before the right-wing dictatorships were overthrown, excuse me, and then you sit down and listen to the kind of country that Ronald Reagan would like to have, the parallels are striking. No public schools, no health care, just armies.
Yeah.
Armies and free enterprise where a handful of people own everything.
Well, I figure that his best friend is anyone who's, worth over $150,000 a year. I've never heard him sympathize one iota for the lower classes. I mean, they're all busy thinking that blacks and women who are not unskilled and everything are just happy strumming their banjos underneath the banana trees. They don't realize that, their main motive is survival and providing the best for what family they might have, but there's no compassion there. There's no understanding that sometimes you just can't meet what financial limits you have, whether you live here or you live in Nicaragua. Those people down there, they need meat. They need electricity. They don't need a big hassle from a bunch of crazy imperialists, excuse me, but I'm beginning to use that word more frequently, trying to manipulate who's going to control their government.
Right, they need, simple little things like shoes and learn how to read.
Yeah, anything. And the Indians down there are taking the worst of all this.
And, of course, Mr. Reagan's surrogate army down there is doing its damnedest to destroy what the socialist, Marxist, call it whatever you want, government has built up in the way of public facilities.
Yeah.
To destroy them for people who desperately need them, and nobody gives a damned.
No, well, they're too busy, figuring out how to buy their next BMW.
Except people like Ben Linder, and he goes down there and helps to rebuild them, and I get jerks calling me up with foreign accents telling me that I'm a communist and that Ben Linder's a communist.
Yeah, I was disturbed the other night.
Well, if that's what communism is, where do I sign up?
Yeah, that man that called the other night and said that he deserved to die, he didn't belong there, I begin to wonder sometimes that there's a lot of people that don't belong anywhere, nowhere on the planet. Goodbye, leave.
If I thought that's what communism is, I'd sign up tonight.
Yeah, I know. Trying to have a little compassion towards other people, that's communism, really. I understand. You have a good night, Bob.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Tampa, you're on the air, WPLP.
Bob.
Hi.
I'm a first-time caller, and I want to tell you that I do not care if Nicaragua's communist. I don't really care. Do you care, really?
Nope. Has no effect on my life whatsoever.
I could not care less.
There is one thing, though, that I care very much about in Nicaragua, as well as in Mexico and El Salvador and Honduras and every other nation in that region that you can mention. There's one thing I care about an awful lot, and that is that the people are fed, that they have housing, clothing, and education, because if they have those things, then they're not going to try to come here.
That's right. And
how they get them, I couldn't care less.
I really don't care. And I cannot believe anybody else cares. You'd think that they were going to take over the country any minute now, the way these right-wingers talk. They're going to take over the United States of America in any minute. It's ridiculous.
I sat there today and listened to hours of testimony from General Secord, and not once did he address the problems that brought the socialist revolution to Nicaragua. Not once.
Oh, well, they think that, that they're going to straighten everybody out and make everybody like we are. It's really disgusting. I agree with everything you say.
I've listened to hour upon hour of our beloved leader, Ronald Wilson Reagan, talk about the situation in Nicaragua, and not once have I heard him address the real problems in Nicaragua. The only thing I hear him address is communism.
Well, he's living in the twilight zone. Truly the twilight zone. He doesn't even know what's going on. I mean, I cannot believe.
Well, that's what he tells us all the time. Gee, I didn't know. Don't ask me. I didn't know.
But these poor countries, I mean, no wonder they hate us. No wonder. It's ridiculous. And I tell you, one day my sons aren't going to go fight down there. And I bet you there's a lot of other women that feel the same way.
An awful lot of people in this country with foreign accents who would like to see your kid go down there
what do?
Shed his blood.
They jump ship when it gets tough, don't they?
You better believe it. You better believe it.
I'm tired of these Cubans calling up. Every Cuban that ever called up is a doctor or a lawyer, and they didn't jump ship because of the freedom.
Well, I remember
because of the money.
Just about a year ago, I had in this studio, sitting directly across this table from me, a Nicaraguan refugee, or what was purported to me to be a Nicaraguan refugee.
Yeah,
and during
millionaire.
He owned a coffee plantation in Nicaragua and was still getting money from it.
That's right.
And he's living someplace in Largo or somewhere up there, and is a doctor here.
This is true.
And he's here. Oh, the communists. Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. Do you still get your checks? Yes, I do. Do you still own the land? Yes, I do. Could you sell it if you wanted to? Yes, I could. Why don't you sell it? Oh, it's too profitable. Oh, the communists, the communists.
And I'm going to tell you something else. Nobody believes this, but about 10 or 15 years ago, I was watching a documentary on Poland. The people were happy as larks.
Well, not everybody's happy in Poland, nor is everybody happy in the United States of America.
There was literal hundreds of American retirees that lived there. Loved it.
Well,
they said their money went so far. Their money went so far. They could have maids, so forth and so on. All right, what happens when they have some financial problems over there? It's freedom. That's not freedom. What they want is money. If they have money, they're happy. They don't care about all that stuff.
You got it, just like we don't give a damn about that Bill of Rights.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to all those retirees. I would love to have a documentary on that now.
Well, forget the retirees. The fact of the matter is, and I know that people in America just hate to hear this, but the overwhelming majority of Russians and Slavs and Poles and Czechs and Hungarians, the overwhelming majority of them are perfectly happy with their way of life.
They love it. Let me tell you what I heard on TV on the radio one day. This woman was talking from the State Department. She was the head woman in the State Department on Russia, knowing, their way of life and things. And so she was saying, well, they're very patriotic, and she was giving information on them. You wouldn't believe the calls that came in. Commie, they called her. Mm-hmm. She said, I work for the State Department.
Yeah, for telling the truth.
I'm giving you information.
Yes, they love their nations.
She said they're very patriotic people. And they said, Commie, get off the radio.
And just like Americans, they're highly suspicious of their government.
I think
they're highly suspicious of their leaders. And they'd like to see things done differently, just like Americans.
But you hear these right-wingers talk, they're trying to break through the doors every second. That's just not true. And if Americans don't think we get propaganda, I got news for them. We get as much propaganda as the Russians do, if not more.
I thank you much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
9:38 the time. Michael, did I take my 35 break? Well, let's do it now.
The phone numbers that put you on the air at WPLP are in Hillsborough.
9:41 the time. Now, don't get me wrong out there, all you good people. I'm not an advocate of Marxism. As a matter of fact, I don't like Marxism. I find it a rather stupid, naive, idealistic concept that cannot work. Just as I find pure capitalism rather stupid, naive, and idealistic. It can't work either. I happen to prefer democratic republics. I happen to prefer a bit of capitalism. And I also happen to prefer some governmental control over capitalism so that it doesn't run hog wild. And In other words, I happen to prefer what we have right here, right now, in this country. And I wish that everybody in the whole wide world could enjoy the same things that I enjoy, the same opportunities that I enjoy, the same freedoms, the same liberties, the same guarantees that I enjoy. But they can't. And I don't happen to be so self-sanctimonious as to tell other people how to live. I know from a cursory study of history what the conditions are and have been in Central and South America. I know what capitalism has done for those nations. Damned little. It's done an awful lot for a handful of people, but nothing for the majority. The overwhelming majority. And I also happen to detest hypocrisy. Because when a president who calls the press sons of bitches and busts labor unions stands with tears in his eyes telling me that, oh, we've got to help the people in Nicaragua because they can't establish labor unions and they don't have a free press, well, then I consider that hypocrisy. And when I see a rather portly retired Air Force general sitting there talking today about his share of the profits in arms sales, and how at the last minute he chose not to draw his profits because he thought it might jeopardize his going back into the military, it turns my stomach. He spent not a second addressing the problems in that region of the world. He gave no indication that he's ever spent a second of his life thinking about the problems in the region of that world. But only about guns, the gains of war and the profits of war. Largo, you're on the air, WPLP.
Good evening, Robert.
Good evening.
I haven't talked to you in quite a while now. You roused me up tonight. I figured I'd better call in. You know, I came up with a solution for the problem.
What's that?
I think it'll make Mr. Reagan happy and make most of the conservatives happy. Why don't we just, you know, if there's such a threat, you know, if we're just scared of these people, we can go in, wipe them out, put up a few McDonald's, and let her rip. You know, and then everyone's happy, right?
There's no doubt in my mind that it would make the conservatives extremely happy.
You know, I mean,
they would have eradicated communism and done nothing to eradicate the problem that brought on communism.
Let's look at history, okay? Let's talk about, say, the Philippines. The atrocities that were performed there by the Marcos government for uncounted years. He was flying the American flag. Hey, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are insurgents. Let's look at Vietnam. It's been over 10 years now since we left.
Yep.
Boy, I tell you, Bob, I feel pretty damn threatened. How about you?
Oh, yeah. I think Hawaii's going to fall to the communists tonight, just like John Foster Dulles told us it would.
Yeah, you know, I don't understand the rationale, and you pointed out a couple of things in your monologue, which I got to say, it was excellent. It was excellent. I'm terribly, terribly sorry that it was wasted on Tampa Bay.
Oh, sir, it wasn't wasted because it drove most of the people listening to this radio program insane because they know it was true and there's not a damn thing they can do to address it.
Well, Bob, you know what the irony is that here you give a speech that no president has made, that, you know, I mean, it made such complete sense, and no one in power has said anything even close to that. I mean, you know, what you're talking about, Bob, is logic. You know, it's logic. You know, I don't see how anyone couldn't come to the conclusion.
It's one of my great flaws. I try to reason with people.
I know, and it blows my mind. They will call up and they will not listen. They will just say, you know, they watched one too many John Wayne movies. I don't know what the problem is. They expect someone to come riding out of the sunset, shoot them up, and hey, everything's okay, hunky-dory, fine. And we tried it in Vietnam, and you saw where that left us.
Well, in the first hour of this program, I put the man on the air tonight who headed up the Alabama book banning case, a man who finally, after a wee tad of arm twisting, told me that he would like to see the Ten Commandments as part of the law in this country, especially those about God.
I caught that, Bob, and that almost prompted me to call, but I decided to wait, and I'm glad I did, because I'm glad I got to hear your monologue. That's kind of a scary thought, isn't it? You know,
No, what's really scary is the majority of people in this country sit back and say,
well, you know, in essence, the Ten Commandments, I have no real problem with that.
I have no problem with 6 of them.
Well, you know, I really have no problem with all of them if that's how you feel. But I don't see where anyone, I assume they're insecure with their own choice for their own life. So insecure that they're going to make me believe in what they believe in, because I'm pretty comfortable with my beliefs, and I don't feel the inclination to try and convert them. So, maybe, I don't know if that makes me lazy. I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with my beliefs and my life, my lifestyle, and I don't feel like I owe them any explanation. They certainly seem like they feel like they owe me one. And it comes back, you were talking about in your monologue about the church, the indifference of the church.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised a Catholic, but God only knows, I never really believed much of it.
Exactly. People scream, the Sandinistas, they're tough on the church. Well, there's a reason they're tough on the church. It's because the church is stupid, naive, and idealistic.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And you brought up a good point with the population. Here's a starving country, and you have the church going, go ahead, have another baby. It's okay.
Not go ahead, have another baby. They ordered people to have another baby because it's their duty to God.
Another thing you brought up, which was an excellent point, and I'm not sure, I'm hoping I heard your first couple callers before me. I think they grasped what you were saying, but you and I, we're going to start a paper, a pro-communist paper, and we're going to distribute it throughout the city. We're probably good for, 48 hours before we're dead?
Well, let us suppose that we also put in that pro-communist paper that the federal government of the United States of America should be overthrown. We don't get 48 hours.
Okay, I think we just cut it to 24 there, Bob. I don't understand. If you're the ruling class, regardless of what idealisms that you're going to put up in front of you as your stand, if you will, regardless of that, you're going to try and maintain power. This is the key. This is the key. People don't realize this, but this is what it's all about. Not obtaining the power, but maintaining the power. That's all they're really interested in. If I tell you what, if the Sandinistas tonight said, you know what, democracy is a pretty good idea. What do you guys think? I don't know, that sounds good to me. Okay? Now, don't you think tomorrow morning Reagan would be, okay, well, they're flying the flag, they're all right. And the irony of...
Well, I don't know, we've been saying to the Russians for years, disarmament's a pretty good idea, and as soon as the Russians said it to us, we said, what?
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is God, it's such a little nation. I mean, we're talking about a place that's not even as big as Texas, you know what I'm saying?
Nowhere's near the size of Texas.
And, I particularly, if Texas decided, well, we're going to overthrow the country, I wouldn't feel all that concerned about it myself.
It's a nation of roughly 3 million people.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
half of whom are children. And this is what we're afraid of, is going to overrun the entire hemisphere?
And what our country, it seems to, or fails to understand, and of course I think it comes back to what you were saying about people here don't put themselves in the other people's place. But here's 100 plus years of total degradation to an entire nation of people is basically it, with the small exception of the ruling class. Okay? And all of a sudden you want to go in there and say, democracy is great, we're wonderful, we're happy guys, and all these people can remember is 100 plus years of complete suffering under people who said the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. And while the people got poorer and poorer, and the ruling class got richer and richer, and the oppression became worse and worse.
Now, do you truly think that the people there are going to love us? Of course not. They've been, what I'm saying is any which way the wind blows. Once I have a feeling once the communists get in power, they're not going to do any better.
No. Absolutely not.
Anything. What are they going to change? What are they going to do? What do they got? Let's see. What kind of natural resources do they have?
Virtually none.
How are they going to put their people to work? They don't have McDonald's.
They don't have a market either for whatever it is that they're able to produce. They have no market for it.
Exactly.
Not a hell of a lot of market in the Soviet Union for bananas.
And if you let them live, and another good lesson is Cuba. Oh, boy, there's another big threat. I'm scared to death of them, man, we should have never let Fidel Castro take over that.
Well, I agree with that, because all the right-wing lunatics left there and came here. We should have stopped him.
Exactly. Probably. But the thing is that he's no threat to us.
No, Fidel Castro didn't spread communism in this country. Fidel Castro spread fascism in this country.
That's true. That is true. But you understand what I'm saying? I mean, these nations are not going to do anything to us. Russia's not going to, Russia's going to use Nicaragua to attack us. You bet. You know, I buy that. It's a lot closer to go from northeastern Russia to Alaska than it is to go from Nicaragua.
Well, besides that, I wish they'd make up their minds, because one minute they're telling me that the Russians are going to overwhelm us with all of these missiles, and the next minute they're telling me that they're going to invade us from Nicaragua. Which is it, guys?
You know, what it really is, Bob, is, again, it's the stupidity of people, the lack of knowledge. And lack of knowledge produces fear. You and I went over that one night. But the point is that these people don't know what they're talking about. If you read what the Communist Manifesto basically says, is that people will come to that point of view on their own.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they're saying, that sooner or later. And what it is now...
It was a prophetic document, nothing more, nothing less.
Exactly. It's no different. It's only as applicable as you want it to be. In other words, if you give it that kind of credence, okay?
Says nothing about taking over the world. What it does is it prophesizes that the world will turn to communism.
And, you know, eventually it probably will. We won't call it that. Well, I'm sure we'll come up with, if not a dandy new term. I'm a big Orwell fan, and I see a lot of newspeak going on around me. And I have no doubt that will come about someday. But the point of it all is that it's not going to matter. And it's so stupid. God, these people are saying this is a secret war. Oh, big secret. You know, these guys can't even keep it a secret. And they're trying to tell me that it's the right thing.
Well, again, if you had the privilege of sitting there watching General Secord today talking with a straight face about some of these almost comical events that he and members of the administration and other past members of the administration and military got themselves involved in, these people are clowns. Except, unfortunately, people are dying because of it.
And that's sad. You know, it's really sad. But that's why I say it's such a waste. Man, you're so intelligent, and I really enjoy listening to the show. I wish to God Ronald Reagan could tune in to you. I just love to. Wouldn't you love to have a tape delay where you could go sit with him and listen to one of your broadcasts?
He wouldn't understand a word I said.
I'm telling you, man, this guy is a trip. He's a trip. He's living. I mean, I was watching a movie, Back to the Future, and not to get off the topic, but they said something about who's president in 1985, and the kid says Ronald Reagan. I thought, my God, if you were standing here in 1955 and someone told you that, you probably would think they were crazy.
Or commit suicide so that you wouldn't be around. My friend, thank you much.
All right, Bob, take care.
Tampa, your turn at WPLP.
Hello, Mr. Lassiter.
Hello.
I find your program very controversial, and I tune in as much as I can, and I'd like to talk tonight about the Contras. Last month, I went down to Nicaragua for a week to actually see for myself what I've been hearing, and it is nothing like Ronald Reagan's been saying. His pessimistic views of Nicaragua are totally absurd.
Well, it's no workers' paradise either, by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, but when I was down there, I saw no oppression. People walked freely. No policemen patrolling or enforcing how would I say, communist. They're right now dealing with the Contras, and the people are free to do as they wish. And
Nicaragua is a nation that is in a state of war, and like any nation that is in a state of war, there are restrictions on freedoms. I wish those freedoms didn't exist, but I also wish the state of war didn't exist.
When the war does end, I would think of moving down there and enjoy it very much. I think people should, if they have the time, if they could just go down there and see for themselves, they would change their views.
Have you been visited by the FBI yet?
No,
You will be.
Well, that's happened to other people.
Yes, it has. Almost everyone who has visited Nicaragua. You will be debriefed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
They think I must be planning spreading communism to the United States.
Who knows what they're thinking?
I just wish I would get out of office because I don't like the United States any longer with him in office. I just wish I could find a country to, like in Australia. You never hear nothing in the news.
Well, now you're beginning to sound like, the great anti-communists from Cuba who fled at the first sign of a problem and didn't stay behind to straighten it out.
Well, my voice, my one vote, I don't think could change everything in the United States.
Well, then you might as well get out now. What are you waiting for? What do you mean your one voice can't change anything in the United States?
I write Ronald Reagan a letter saying, I don't like what you're doing in Nicaragua. Stop. He'll ball the letter up, throw it in the garbage.
That's correct. That's correct.
So it is a waste of time.
Writing him a letter? Yes, it is. Writing him a letter is probably a waste of time.
I should spend my time efficiently instead of...
Yes, you should spend your time efficiently talking to your fellow citizens, trying to point out the errors of their ways to them. But if that's too much trouble for you, then I think you should leave. Because you're not an American.
I just wish Hinckley did it the right way the first time.
Get off the air. No, you're not an American. You're just a pig. No, that's not the way we do things in this country. You're no better than the right-wing fascists. You're obviously a left-wing fanatic. And I have no time for them either. No time whatsoever. This is the United States of America. You do things through a peaceful democratic process. If I knew who you were, I would contribute to your ticket to leave. And I pity any country that would take you. And how sorry I am that I gave you 3 minutes on the air. How incredibly sorry I am. Almost as sorry as I am that I share a community with you. I have no time for you. Don't ever call the program again. You make me sick to my stomach. What in the hell makes you think that you're better than the right-wing lunatics is beyond me. Totally beyond me. About a minute away from the CBS News at the top of the hour. We still have one more open hour following that. Please, whatever you do, don't venture very far.
Present to you the scourge of the shuffleboard set, the man the Trailer Court Association would like to run out of town, Tampa Bay's top banana of talk, the monstrous Mad Dog Bob Lassiter.
7 minutes after the hour of 10 o'clock, Tuesday night, May the 5th, 1987. One line open, it's in Pinellas. 393-0057, 393-0057. Clearwater, your turn at WPLP.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Lassiter.
Good evening.
Some time ago you mentioned 5% of the land, I believe you said, was owned by individuals. Who are the landlords then that own the other 95% of the land in South America?
I beg your pardon?
Who are the other 90%?
What did I say? 5% of the people own the land.
I believe you said 5% of individuals.
5% of the people own the land. 95% of the people are landless.
That's what I mean. Okay, who owns the other 95% or controls it?
The 5%, sir, own the 95% of the land.
Then who owns the other? Okay. Who are the landlords of the 95% then?
The 5%, sir. Is that a very difficult concept for you to grasp?
Yes, it is, because who makes up that 5%?
The ruling class, sir. That's who makes it up.
And who are the ruling class? For example, is it a political or a religious phenomena?
I suspect it's an economic phenomena, sir, that have run to a political shelter.
In other words, then, it's not government-controlled.
To the best of my knowledge, in most areas, no, sir. Privately.
So,
which you should know, too.
In the long run, if South America then were...
I'm getting tired of the 20 questions. Why don't you get to your point?
The point is what I was asking, is why the problem in South America, whoever controls South America and is keeping down the education of the young people, is this to continue to keep control of a certain class of people in South America.
That's your point.
This is what I'm trying to get at, a point.
Anything else?
This is a point that needs to be, or taken care of. In other words, if South America then were to have no problems and it was completely safe for Americans and Europeans to go to South America, is it an advantage to keep the condition as is to this country?
Oh, I see.
Would it be an advantage as far as tourism and so forth would be concerned?
I don't
think you're seeing what I'm trying to tell.
I think I do see what you're trying to say, is that this government should go in and dictate to the South American countries how they will behave themselves so that we can keep it free for American tourists to travel.
Not at all. That's the whole point.
Well, apparently I have.
You missed the whole
Could you be a little less esoteric and a little more to the point?
I haven't been able to get to the point because you cannot been able to see what I'm trying to get through to you.
Well, I have an awful funny feeling that if I devoted the rest of the program, that it would still be the same situation. Tampa, you're on the air, WPLP.
Tom?
You're on the air.
Tom? Listen, I take my hat off to you. You got guts. You got guts. I've seen people die, take suicide that done much less than what you had said on the radio. Much less.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they have gone to see what was going on, and when they came back, they were held. They went through hell. Some of them committed suicide.
Really?
Yeah, they went to Mexico and then to see if they thought they could go to Nicaragua without this American knowing, and when they got back, they went through hell.
Well, you don't have to go to Mexico to go to Nicaragua. You can fly direct from Miami.
Yeah. Well, I'm taking my hat off to you. There's millions of people. I have the same opinion, but I'm scared to. I'm afraid to say what you said on the radio. I think I would. The Internal Revenue and the FBI and every damn thing would make it hell for me.
Well, no, sir. This isn't Batista's Cuba. This is the United States of America. We don't do things like that here.
Well, I'm not. I'm American. I got an accent. I was born right here, but. I am taking my hat off to you. That's the most intelligent conversation or whatever you call it that I've heard in a long time. And I guess the millions of people got the same idea, but they're scared to express the idea that you have expressed tonight because they're scared. They're gonna be bugged by the FBI, the Internal Revenue, and maybe they'll do it to you. Maybe the Internal
Well, again, sir, I point out to you, this is the United States of America. It is not Batista's Cuba.
You're a brave guy because, I have the same opinion, but I'm scared to say the things that you said. So I take my hat off to you because you're taking a chance. The revenue...
Well, it's the third time you've said it. I thank you very much. Sisberg, you're on here at WPLP.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, Mr. Lassiter, first-time caller. I hear we are supposed to be the best country in the world, but I believe we have a long way to go. I'm making a few comments, I'm going to hang up. Our gun control stinks.
We're not talking about gun control tonight,
No, I'm not. But I say one-third of the cars go past my place have a revolver in them. How stupid can we be?
Sir, that's not the topic tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay.
Here's three or four more with the other things. Our medical system stinks.
Sir, that's not our topic tonight. Lutz, you're on there at WPLP.
Thanks, Bob. While I agree somewhat with your sentiment, I have to tell you that I'm one of the honors that you were letting out your emotional vomit on. I think that the problem that we have here is that we have to take care of our immediate situation, whether it's buying a beer or paying the rent or whatever. And when people talk about the problem on the air, which I think is good, it allows them to vent what they feel about it.
Well, the problem is, in the meanwhile, while we're doing that, there are, turkeys like General Secord running around the world wearing masks and phony wigs and mustaches and playing games that are costing people their lives in your name and in my name.
Yeah. However, again, while that's wrong, it's not just Secord. It's happening everywhere. I mean, it's happening in the third world. It's happening here. When I lived in New York, I used to hang out with some of these folks that used to think that the police were actually the ones that were pushing heroin to the poor, the black ghettos, etc. Okay? And again, that has nothing to do with this. But it's kind of like the system allows you gives you something to talk about and takes you away from the real problem. Admittedly, this is a real problem. Admittedly, Secord said what he said, okay? And I'm sure that there's more to it. And I have to admit, I didn't watch, the news today.
Well, not everybody has the luxury of sitting home all afternoon watching.
Okay. Well, the point is, though, that there's more to it. While we do talk about it, while we do our anger, we're talking about one specific problem not very far away from us. The real problem is the class struggle here. And I'm not talking about just the poor people. I'm talking about the retirees that are living on fixed incomes, that are trying to, take care of themselves. I'm talking about you. You want to maintain your lifestyle, such as it is, and me, etc., okay?
Mm-hmm.
Until we take care of our own business, how are we going to help those other folks?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, but I also happen to feel that one of the best ways to put out our problems here at home and the dangers that we are facing here at home is by going to a place like Nicaragua, at least conversationally going to Nicaragua, and demonstrating what has gone on down there, who the people are, what their philosophies were that caused the problems that are there today.
True. However, we're focusing on Nicaragua today. Tomorrow it'll be Gary Hart. Next week it'll be Jim Baker. Everything is like 60-minute news, okay? And again, this is all purely rhetorical on my part, but
I know what you're saying.
I think the base of it all, and I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I think the base of it all is that if we don't take care of our problems here, we're not going to do anything about Nicaragua. We can, pardon me, bitch all we want about Secord and Reagan and everyone else. And by the way, you also said that Reagan, if he listened to your program, wouldn't understand the word. I disagree with you highly. I don't like him, but I think the dude is sharp, and he's using you and he's using me. And he would, if he listened to this, he would be laughing all the way to the bank. And that's all I can say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One line open. It is in Hillsborough. Clearwater, you're on the air, WPLP.
Oh, okay, sir. Well, Mr. Bob, you're difficult to comprehend. Listening to this thing, and it sort of reminded me at the end of your last hour, where 1 hour you played some cards, but you really sucked a lot of people in. And I hope that the FBI doesn't have your phone tapped and all, because you sure drew in all of these real far left wingers, and you are not that. You express that. And
I've had one far left winger, sir.
Yeah, well, he was way out. But you're not expressing that, and that's what people don't seem to comprehend, in the fact that you're expressing, I could tell a story. I don't know how much time you got here, but like my dad used to shoe mules. And those mules were obstinate, and they'd kick him against the wall, and he'd beat him up and everything, and I felt sorry for the mule. So, I've been sort of an idealist for a long, long time. And I remember having some candy, and I fed those mules some candy, and he could shoe those mules, and he was real proud of how well he could shoe those mules until he found me one day feeding them candy while they were shoeing them. And I think to some extent your philosophy is the same. Let's give these people something if we're going to spend money. What the Russians are doing. Gee whiz, they're going down there and doing our workforce that we disbanded, our Peace Corps, didn't we?
No, it's still theoretically intact.
Theoretically intact. Oh, there's one other question, Mr. Bob. I wonder whether you can answer this with your statistics on the amount of wealth being owned down in South America. I seem to remember that the wealth in this country, 80% of it is owned by about 15% of people.
Something in that neighborhood. I was more in the impression of 20, but for the purpose of the conversation, I'll go along.
Isn't that amazing? We are supposed to own our own homes and all, but really and truly, when you stop and think about it, we're just paying on it to the bankers, loan agencies, etc. And really, only 20% of the country owns 80% of the wealth.
That's correct.
Isn't that great?
We're close enough.
Isn't that great?
Mm-hmm.
God bless you.
And it gets worse every day.
Bye-bye.
To join in the conversation, the number to call in Hillsborough County is WPLP Morning News Guarantee. In 30 minutes or less, we'll deliver the news you can use from around Tampa Bay and around the world. The WPLP Morning News. First thing every morning. All news, all morning. 5:30 to 9. News for the serious news person.
3:32 the time. Amazingly, 2 lines open in Pinellas County. Wouldn't you know it? 393-0057 Tampa. You're on the air.
Bob.
Yes.
I have to answer that statement, that you were difficult to understand. You did not say a word that is not true. If they wish to understand you, I would suggest they learn their history, and they'll find everything you said in it. In history, too, it says about an opium war where the American government fought with the British because they had the right to sell opium, their property right, laissez-faire, capitalism. We fought a war. We killed people. And the Chinese government did not believe in it, and so it brought this war and the Boxer rebellions, too, which Paula Hawkins stopped. She said, when the Chinese started selling opium to us just recently. Also, in Tokyo Bay, Commodore Perry sent his battleships to open the door after the Japanese told us that they wanted to remain isolationist. They didn't want to have anything to do with the world. And we forced them into our way of life.
The majority of our military adventures have been for economic reasons.
Which brought Pearl Harbor much later on. We had our Hiroshima, Nagasaki. God hope, bless that we don't have that in the future. But what I see in history is this.
The Japanese that you're speaking of wanted nothing to do with our barbaric ways, and we were so appalled, we fought our way in.
They can learn that in history, exactly right. What I have learned from history is this phenomena, and that is not only on our own American history, but throughout the world, that there is a struggle between property rights and human rights. Those who have property rights are wealthy, powerful. They want to dominate. They're tyrannical. And, of course, the oppressed, the population at best, they're poor, they don't have the freedom. So these people want freedom, liberty, democracy, calidad, democracia, and this kind of, these are the two forces throughout the history of mankind, which, if the conservative far right continues to push, as they are pushing to gain their power and wealth, what's going to happen is we either are going to demand more and more liberalism, as did happen during the Great Depression under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Thank God that we had political democracy, and this president was wise enough that if he and the government did not give the American people more suffrage, that they would fall into communism also. And we have not learned the lesson. The world does not want communism. I know you do not want communism. Castro did not want communism. Ho Chi Minh did not want communism. They came to Eisenhower, to our country, and begged for help. They did not have the political democracy that we were so blessed by our forefathers. So it left them with only one alternative, to turn to the monster. Even the Russians do not care for communism. They're asking for democracy even today. It's not communism that are drumming up communism. It's our own international, multinational conglomerates supported by our government, the far-right property owner.
And by an awful lot of American citizens who just don't know any better.
They haven't learned their history, Bob. And you're sounding more like Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, Thomas Jefferson, I'm sorry to say, Madison, Jackson, Jesus, Gandhi, and King. Sleep well.
Be good.
Thank you.
Newport Richie, you're on the air at WPLP.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
I was listening at the end of your last hour there, and that man that called at the very end.
Uh-huh.
He was saying that, like he wished that Hinckley had done the job right against Reagan there,
Uh-huh.
And, that was such a terrible thing that he said, and but it reminded me that these people like Daniel Ortega and the communists, they like this sort of thing, and they would rather have a government to where we don't have the free elections and the democratic process.
I don't know what the hell Daniel Ortega wants, do you?
Well,
I have no idea what he wants.
Well, it seems
I'm not inside of his head.
Well, neither do I, really. But I don't think anybody does. Seems to me that they haven't had any elections down there that I know of.
No, they're in a state of war, sir.
Well, we had elections during World War II.
Yeah, but we didn't have invading forces in our nation.
Well, seems to me that when Somoza was in power, the Sandinistas, everyone should forget that they broke up elections.
Yes, sir, that's true.
And the people, when they did vote, they voted for Somoza and not for the Sandinistas.
Yes, sir, that's probably true.
And you were saying in the last hour, that people are happy in Poland and all these other countries.
Yeah, there are people who are happy in Poland.
Well, there were a lot of people that were happy under Hitler, too.
That's correct, sir.
But I don't know why you think that Nicaragua's and the Sandinistas should remain in power.
Sir, I don't recall saying that they should remain in power.
Well,
what I recall saying is that we should our noses the hell out of it.
Well, why?
Because it's none of our damned business, and our intentions are anything but golden.
It's none of our business when a bunch of thugs take over a country illegally?
That's right, sir. It's none of our business. It's not our country. Nicaragua is not the 51st state.
Well, you mean we shouldn't try and help our friends? We should just turn a blind eye and...
We're not trying to help our friends, sir.
Well, what happens when something like this happens in Canada? Should we just go, oh, well, we don't care?
Well, it's not going to happen in Canada, sir, because the conditions that bred the socialist, communist, call it whatever you want, revolution in Nicaragua do not exist in Canada.
Well, a lot of people thought that Somoza was a big strong man and nothing this would ever happen to him.
Well, those people were very stupid, sir, because the conditions that breed communism were rampant in Nicaragua. They're not in Canada.
Well, I don't know. I
know, obviously.
Well, obviously, yeah. You've had a lot of people on tonight that, in the last hour, some of the calls were just pathetic. Like that one from St. Pete that, she was calling us imperialists. I mean, come on, give me a break. Russia's the biggest imperialist empire that I know of.
Oh, really?
Where did you get off calling us imperialists?
Because we do an awful lot of imperialist things.
Oh, imperialism implies starting empires, and
that's right.
We don't have an empire.
No, and we're really PO'd about it, aren't we?
I don't think so.
Oh, really?
You tell me. Say if at the end of World War II, if Russia wasn't around and it was just Britain and us against Germany, and Germany had lost, do you think the world was in such a messed up shape as it is now?
I haven't the vaguest idea, sir. I'm not clairvoyant.
All these big armies.
I'm not really into what-if games.
Well, I know it's all hypothetical, but think about it for a minute. Eastern Europe. I mean, if that's not part of the Russian Empire, I don't know what it is.
Well, if Western Europe isn't part of the U.S. empire, I don't know what it is.
Oh, well, that's not true.
Oh.
We don't keep armies in.
We don't?
Where we're not.
I beg your pardon?
Well,
I beg your pardon?
Well, take France, for example. We got out of France when they said, you boys get out, and we got out.
That's right. Because we didn't give a damn about France. It wasn't important to us. If it was, we wouldn't have gotten out.
Well, let's take that as an example. You say that the Russians won't use Nicaragua against us, or they're not really that important. But why are they so threatened when we have troops in, say, Turkey or allies in Iran and Norway when they're right on the border? I mean, it's almost the same thing.
No, it's not exactly the same thing. Nicaragua is 900 miles away from the closest U.S. land, which is Key West. 900 miles away.
Well, it's the same way. We could use West Germany as an example, or something like that. They're still threatened by it. So why is it wrong for us to be threatened by it?
It isn't wrong for us to be threatened by it, sir. We're permitted to be threatened by it, but it is not right for us to go in and back the right-wing ruling class who have no intentions whatsoever for democracy or restoring a democracy where it never existed.
Well, how do you
never, ever did democracy exist in Nicaragua.
Well, I agree with you.
And our president has no problem in lying through his
teeth. I agree with you there, Bob. How do you know that they're not trying to restore? I don't want to say restore, but I mean, start a democracy.
Well, as an example, sir, these patriotic Nicaraguans whose only purpose in life is to get rid of the communists, whose only purpose in life would not support their fellow anti-communists to the south because they were afraid that the people in the south, in Pastora, and those people would get to Managua first, and they would be in power. They're buddies. They're anti-communist right-wing buddies. They wouldn't support them.
Well, unfortunately, I don't know anything about that. So, I really can't comment on that because I don't know. But it just...
They're not interested in democracy, sir. They're interested in getting back what they lost.
Well, how do you know that? You don't know that.
So I just told you. I just gave you a glaring example of it.
Well, that's...
How the rebels in the North would not give aid to the rebels in the South because they were afraid that the rebels in the South would get to Managua first, and then they would be in power.
True. How do you know that's true?
Richard Secord told me today, sir, on the television.
I just don't see what is so wrong about trying to stop communism. This country is...
Sir, there's something terribly wrong in trying to stop communism if you don't have an alternative. And we don't have an alternative. All we want to do is stop communism.
Well,
we couldn't care less about the problems in Central and South America.
I just don't see why it can't be that the people down there, I don't know what's wrong with them, why they can't seem to get it together. I don't know how.
Why they can't get it together, sir? It's called 150 years of oppression. It's called 150 years of being a peon, not being allowed to own land, not being allowed to have a vote, not being allowed to be a full human being. That's what it's called, sir.
That's why they need democracy. They don't need communism because it's not...
No, sir, they need an even break, and they couldn't get an even break under so-called democracy.
Well, when have they ever had a real democracy? You said it yourself. There's never been a real democracy in Nicaragua.
That's right. There are only right-wing dictatorships, and that's what we're trying to reestablish, is another right-wing dictatorship.
Well, I don't know that, and you don't know that either.
Sir, the Contras were the former right-wing dictators.
They weren't dictators. I agree with you. Some of them were National Guardsmen and all that, but...
Yeah, and one of them owned the Coca-Cola plant, the only one.
Well, I don't believe it.
Great freedom fighters who now sit in luxury. Great freedom fighters who now sit in luxury in Miami condos overlooking Biscayne Bay.
Well, it just, I just don't believe all this. It's so much propaganda. It really is, Bob.
Is it, sir?
Yes, it is. And you know it is.
Sir, you just called me a liar. You're gone.
The phone numbers that